As a trauma survivor, I have always been interested in resilience. But growing up, I believed it was something that you were born with. Then in graduate school, I learned that it was a quality that we all possess and a set of skills we can all strengthen. Most of my resilience has come from writing and seeing myself in new ways by confronting the stories I've always told myself. The more I did that, the stronger I became, and I've dedicated my life to helping others do this work. This podcast is for anyone who wants to understand their story and how to revise it, because when we do that work, we change the world. Writing can be a powerful tool for healing, but when writing the tough stuff, it's easy to get triggered and relive the experiences you're writing about. If you're wondering what to do when you're triggered and how to care for yourself and your writing life, join me and somatic experiencing practitioner Kirby Moore as we explore how the nervous system works and how to care for it and your creative life. During this episode, Kirby will teach you a powerful tool you can use right now to calm your nervous system and experience a greater sense of calm and ease. While you can listen to this on any platform, if you're a visual learner, this is a great episode to watch on YouTube. Let's dive in. In memoir, every scene should move your story forward, but it can be difficult to figure out which scenes belong, let alone how to frame them when writing about trauma and other tough topics. How do you know which details are essential to your story and which ones will just overwhelm readers? And just as important, how do you write these scenes without triggering yourself? These are common questions that can be so tough to answer. That's why I'm teaming up with Jane Friedman on October 16th to teach Mastering Trauma Scenes to Improve Your Memoir. During this webinar, you'll learn the difference between trauma, crisis, and rising action, how a scene's position in your manuscript will determine which details matter, and how to slant your material so that it propels your story forward. You'll leave with a deeper understanding of your story, confidence in your ability to add tough scenes to your memoir, and tools that will help you care for your readers and yourself. Best of all, this webinar is only $25. That's right, $25. For that price, you'll get access to the webinar, a workbook filled with tips and tricks, a copy of the recording, and a copy of the comprehensive Q&A. So if you want to craft a story that hooks readers and keeps them glued to your memoir, join me on October 16th for Mastering Trauma Scenes to Improve Your Memoir. The link is in the show notes. Well, hello, Kirby. Welcome to the Writing Your Resilience podcast. I am delighted to have you on today.
Thank you so much. It's great to be here. I'm really looking forward to our discussion today.
Well, I am too. And I'm really excited, not just for myself, because I know that I'm going to learn some new things from you, but so many people have questions about the best ways to work through trauma. And how do you work with your nervous system? And you have many different answers for us. So I'm going to begin by giving you a chance to tell us a little about you and what you do.
Sure. So about my work, I offer process-oriented body work. I support my clients' nervous systems after trauma, nurturing resilience. And in the past several years, I've even started mentoring people who are interested in what I offer. So I primarily work with adults and also mothers and babies. So I'm a licensed massage therapist. And so I approach the trauma resolution and somatic experiencing through touch. I'm licensed to touch. But I can also do distance sessions as well. I've taken advanced training in helping clients embody difficult emotions with integral somatic psychology. And I work with moms and babies because I've also trained in pre and perinatal psychology and birth process work. And the modality I've actually been working with the longest is biodynamic craniosacral therapy. So I've been doing that for close to 20 years.
Okay, so I'm going to ask you just very briefly say, what is biodynamic cranial sacral therapy? Because people are going to be like, what the what? And then we're going to get into like, what is somatic experiencing and how can you help us understand that as we think about creativity?
Oh, sure. So biodynamic craniosacral therapy is a gentle, non-invasive, hands-on bodywork technique for the whole body. It's performed on a massage table. The client is fully clothed, and the practitioner's touch is very light, gentle, and for the most part, it's still. It's not massage. It's not manipulative. The session focus is to support the inherent health of the whole being especially the nervous system. And I love that biodynamic cranial work. It works with the health which is never lost, also
Hmm.
known as the breath of life. So really seeing the client, seeing the person on my table as whole, as healthy, as having this innate healing plan within them, and I'm just helping them to reconnect to that, to rediscover that, and to, yeah, strengthen their resilience and strengthen their awareness that they have the healing tools within.
I love that framework. It also aligns with how I was trained as a counselor because, there are two different frameworks we can work from. We can work from an illness modality where we're
Mhm.
looking for illness, which is what happens in clinical psychology, or we can look at how do we help people connect with their wholeness, and this certainly does that. And I have experienced that. And what I can say about that is that it allows you to be in your body, especially if you're a person who has trouble being in your body.
Right. Yeah, there's a lot of research that shows early developmental trauma can lead to checking out, whether it's,
Yeah.
lighter daydreaming or a deeper freeze kind of dissociation state. But it's very common. But thankfully, there's many tools and methods for working through it, and it can be repaired, it can be healed. It's not a life sentence. Personally, I have come so far in the past 20 years in terms of embodying, feeling what it's like to be human, and yeah, really being here.
Being here is the most important thing we can do, both as human beings and as artists. And yet, it can be so challenging for so many people. And so, you do cranial sacral work, you also do somatic experiencing. Help us understand what that is because I see it as a buzzword everywhere and people don't know what it is.
Right. Somatic experiencing is very popular these days, right? They're creating new trainings all the time, all over the world now, and so there's thousands of people certified. And somatic experiencing, also known as SE for short,
Mhm.
is a powerful modality. It's a set of tools in which a number of health and wellness practitioners can be trained. So its primary aim is to release, recover, and to resolve trauma, shock, or other stress disorders.
Mhm.
In SE, practitioners learn about the physiology of trauma and the way it can get stuck in the autonomic nervous system. And so they learn tools to reorganize the nervous system and nurture resilience. Because a number of different practitioners can be trained in SE, the somatic experiencing practitioners offer nervous system repair work within their scope of practice.
Mm.
So for the most part, I'd say the most SEPs are actually psychotherapists. So
Mhm.
they may not have hands-on if they don't have that background, if they don't have that training. Whereas myself, I do more hands-on work and less psychotherapy because of my scope of practice. It's a 3-year training where you attend these modules for 36 days total, as well as completing many personal sessions and receiving ample supervision
Mhm.
over that time.
That's really helpful because I know that there are going to be people who want to work with someone who has experience in somatic experiencing. And what I hear you saying is that somatic experiencing is a training, it's kind of an add-on to what you're
Mhm.
already doing if you're in a healing profession. So if you're a therapist and maybe talk therapy is the way that you tend to work with people, somatic experiencing is going to be a way that you work with people in addition to the talk therapy. So there's going to be a lot of talking involved. Whereas with you, massage is that's the modality that you first trained in. So you approach somatic experiencing from that lens. And so that's why there's the hands on with you, and there's probably going to be more talking with someone else.
Right, right. Because of my background working with the polyvagal system, working with birth process work, the integral somatic psychology, I've done training to heal developmental trauma.
Mhm.
And so I there can be some talking with me as well, but clients can really tell me, what they want and what's better for them. About 10 years ago, I realized through my touch that I could feel when people were checking out under my
Mm.
hands. So, yeah, about 10 years ago, I felt through my touch when people were present and when they weren't, right?
Mhm.
Which is fine. We all check out from time to time.
Yeah.
Life happens, stress happens. And however, in the past 5 years or so, I've realized I can now feel that without touching somebody. And
Mm.
so I can do distant sessions. I do distant SE sessions with people. I have a number of clients in Europe and actually in Asia who I've never met in person, and we
Mm.
do great work together. So,
So let's talk about this whole issue of checking out. I know you have
okay.
some exercises you're going to have us do. I'm very excited about that. We're going to
Uh-huh.
work through that together. But before we get there, you talked about checking out. And there are a lot of different ways that people can check out. Sometimes you're just daydreaming. And I think writers in particular, and also other kinds of artists, try to check out because they're trying to tap into something outside of themselves. And yet, there are types of checking out, we'll call it dissociation, that are not necessarily helpful to you, or they're not necessarily enhancing your creativity. Can you talk about the difference between the two, or why it might be important for you as an SE practitioner to know when someone's checking out? Like, why would you care about that?
Sure. So I have a number of analogies and yeah, I've got some thoughts about this for sure. First of all, if we go through a loss or if we go through a big stressor,
Mhm.
there may not be any trauma around that at all, right? But if I'm processing big grief, if I'm processing a loss, I might check out from time to time. I might find
Mhm.
myself daydreaming. I might just need to lay in a hammock in the backyard for 2 hours and just stare
Yeah.
at the sky. And so that's one level of checking out, right? But there's certainly a deeper level. We in SE, we talk about a deeper parasympathetic freeze,
Mhm.
sort of a ventral vagus, the vagus nerve, the ventral side of that, where it's almost a deep early, like, mammalian sort of response to
Mhm.
big stress, a big threat. Like, I shut down, right? Like, I play
Yeah.
dead. And so the deeper dissociation, which can often coincide with early trauma, the reason that can be exhausting is because when there is if we look at the cause of deeper dissociation, what caused somebody to check out in that deep way?
Mhm.
It means there was some activation which was too much. It was too big, too soon, too fast,
Yeah.
and it was very overwhelming. And so that big activation is also present in the system.
Yes.
But underneath the dissociation is the big activation.
Mhm.
And so that's why you wanna be a competent practitioner to know how to tease out a little bit of that activation at a time. So, understanding how the individual got triggered to be pushed out of fight or flight and into this deep parasympathetic freeze. And there's dissociation with this high activation level as well. And if that becomes a chronic pattern, that's a lot of energy, that's a lot of
Mhm.
stuff to keep contained in the nervous system. And so that's exhausting. Right? And so that's the deeper dissociation that we're talking about. And so there's this big recruitment of psychic energy to keep that stuff contained, to keep the
Mhm.
trauma response contained. And it makes sense that this will tax us. And so not just our creativity could suffer, but our natural curiosity, our
Yeah.
sense of wonder, spontaneity, our sense of ease, our ability to play. We probably don't feel so safe when there's this big activation underneath a numbing out, right? And it can even affect our sense of humor, and obviously it can affect our social relationships as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I had some two pretty big ahas in this area that I think go along with everything that you're saying, because I have a high capacity for dissociation. In fact, I'll be honest with you, there's a part of me that loves it. It's like, what are the colors of the clouds on my world? Let me tell you all about it. It's great, right? And I thought for a long time, oh, this is what makes me creative. And recently I listened to two different podcasts that made me go, oh, maybe not so much.
Uh-huh.
And one was the work of Ashok Gupta. He does a lot of work around chronic illness. And what he was talking about is that when we are dissociating in that parasympathetic way, or that sympathetic way, I would imagine, even if it feels like nothing on the surface, our bodies are in that fight, flight, freeze, fawn, activated state. And so we are expending a lot of energy at that time. And then the other thing that I recently heard was Dr. Huberman. He has this podcast and he talks about a lot of different things, but he had a specialist who was on about the amygdala. We often connect the amygdala with fight or flight and, danger and the whole that aspect of the limbic system. But what this person was saying is that the role of the amygdala is actually it's about motivation, right? And the
Hmm.
the thing is that fear just happens to be really really motivating. So if you are in a lot of fear states, you have a lot of activation of the nervous system, then that is going to be the motivation that your amygdala and insula are focusing on. And that will not necessarily help you be more creative.
Right. Well, the amygdala is really geared towards helping us survive,
Yes.
right? Which is a big motivation.
Mhm. It's
I
like the most important one.
right. If there's a big threat, I want to survive, and that's very
Yes.
motivating. But yeah, so it can be fear, but also anger or rage.
Mhm.
But some of us, maybe it's not safe to get in touch with those emotions. But yeah, the amygdala has so much to do with emotional processing, emotions around memories, and implicit memory, so unconscious memory. So stuff we aren't even consciously aware of what's happening
Yes.
in our unconscious reactions to things. Yeah, it's all right there.
Yeah, and so I mean, I have practiced Buddhism for a long time. I have known this idea of be here now, the importance of, the present moment, but all of that brought it to the forefront for me in a very different way. It's like I finally understood, oh, this is why we have to do this. And somatic experiencing can be a great way to reground yourself and get back in touch with who you are, where you are, when you are, so that your energy can be free to do other things. And so you have a couple of exercises for us. Do you feel like
Yes.
now is a good time to try that out so that we can not just understand intellectually what this is, but we can actually feel it?
Right, right. A part of the work that I do is literally a somatic transmission, right? And
Mm.
you can't talk about that or not in a way that's going to be experienced.
Yes.
And so, yeah, one course that I offer is called Liberating the Space Element. And
Hmm.
this is a great course. It's a total of about 3.5 hours of material, including close to an hour of somatic tools and different holds with the body to help to balance the fascia, to come back to ourselves if we feel stretched thin. Yeah, really good for the connective tissue, for the
Hmm.
joints, but making more space inside. Right? Can I slow down? Can I breathe? Can I feel my body? So these two exercises are the two autonomic nervous system gateways from a series of holds on the body called the reciprocals. So the reciprocals are about 30 to 40 different holds. And in my course, which I'll talk about later, we go through all of the reciprocals and more. But for this example, even for the people out there listening who can't see me, I'll explain it. So first, let's start with having one hand on the occipital bone, which is the base of the skull in the back. So basically, if your thumb is on the point where your neck and head come together, the rest of your hand is on the occiput bone. Okay, so one hand is on the back and the base of your skull, and then the other hand will be on your sacrum. So the base of your spine, the sacrum is where spine and pelvis come together. And so whether you have your hand face up or facing away from you, it doesn't matter. As long as you have, if you can make contact with the sacrum, that's best.
So I'm going to
Um,
ask you, in case people don't know what the sacrum is this down really low on my belly? So am I on my belly or am I on my back? Like,
oh,
where
okay,
is my
so you're
hand?
you're on your back. Yeah, thanks for asking. Yeah, so the sacrum is the triangular shaped bone at the base of the spine.
Okay, so I'm
And
going to go ahead and put my hand behind myself.
yeah, and so yeah, so you're near your butt, near your glutes. And so when you touch both occiput to sacrum, I want you to take 3 deep breaths and notice what happens inside as you do so. If your listeners want to, they can do 4 or 5 deep breaths. I wouldn't do more than that to start. So after you do 3 to 5 deep breaths, go ahead and move your hands. So relax your hands. And I can just explain briefly, for most people, holding sacrum to occiput, basically you're on the top of your spine and the bottom of your
Mhm.
spine. For most people, that helps to stimulate the parasympathetic.
Mhm.
So for most people, that will be down regulating. You will feel calmer. You might feel more grounded or more settled. However, about 20% of people out there have a paradoxical effect when they hold that. And so if you felt stimulated, if you feel more alert when you're holding occiput to sacrum, that means you're actually stimulating your sympathetic system
Mhm.
instead. And then you should try this next one and see if that calms you down. However, for most people, this next one we're going to do actually stimulates the sympathetic nervous system. And so we will often feel more alert after doing it. And let me slow myself down here in the moment. And just, yeah, if you want to take a moment, take 10 seconds, 20 seconds, just to notice what's happening inside. What is your somatic experience on the inside after doing this one easy hold?
Yes. And as people are doing that and thinking about their own experience, I'm going to share my experience and I invite you to share your experience as well. Because I think not everybody understands what calm is, or they
Mhm.
don't know how to look for it in their body. And so for me, which is interesting because I'm also, hosting a podcast. So there is a lot of alertness here. What I felt when I did that was like there was this fuzziness in my head at the beginning, and then it felt like I could even see this fuzziness as almost like a cloud of cotton in my
Mhm.
brain. That's probably
Mhm.
the best way to talk about it. And as I did that and I took one breath, then another, it was like the cotton melted away and
Wow.
there was clear space. And so that was what my experience was. And I would agree that for me, that was calming. What was it like for you? What did that feel like?
Yeah, so in spite of having been doing this for close to 20 years, it's great to be reminded. And also, here I am kind of doing public speaking. So
Right.
there's a little bit of nerves here. And so doing that for me was also calming. So I feel more in my belly, more in the base of my body, more deeper in my pelvis.
Mhm.
And so I've done a lot of work to come down into my heart, into my core, into my gut, and even my lower body. And I also realize that for a lot of people, that's hard to do, but you can get there over time. So
So would you say that is the goal, like to bring the awareness from what's ever going on in your head, regardless of what part of your body you're touching, to down deeper and deeper into the body, more towards the core?
long-term goal, yes. In this moment, if somebody has a lot of thoughts and it's hard to turn off the busy monkey mind, even having more awareness of what's happening in my head. Do
Mhm.
I have more sensation around my head or scalp or face? Can I feel my throat more? Just starting there is
Right.
big, is great. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I love that. So we just did some a calming exercise. Now you're gonna amp us up a little. Let's get started.
Right. So if you do tend towards anxiety, I want you to really listen to your body. And so this, of course, Lisa, this goes for you, but for your listeners, more importantly,
Mhm.
if someone has high anxiety, you might only want to do this for 2 deep breaths as opposed to
Mhm.
3 or more. If you are somebody who's really sluggish and you are rarely ever alert, then maybe you want to do 5 deep breaths here. But notice how fast you feel alertness, if that's what you feel. And if you have the paradoxical reaction to it, this may also calm you down. So notice what happens. So this
Yeah, and I
whole
just wanna just say before we get into the exercise, I know I'm, like, breaking it down, breaking it down.
good.
So, if someone is really anxious, some symptoms that you might have, if you're like, "I don't know if I'm anxious or not," maybe your thoughts are fluttering back and forth, or you have a lot of thoughts, or you feel amped up like you've had a lot of coffee, or it's hard to sit still, or the idea of sitting and breathing sounds like the 7th level of hell. All
Yeah.
of these things would be, suggestions to go slow.
Yeah, go slow and keep in mind, especially on this next one, less is better than more. So
Mm,
so if you feel more alert after 2 deep breaths, you can move your hands sooner than I tell you to.
mhm.
Please, by all means. So this hold, if you are just listening and you can't see it, we'll explain it. It might be a little bit easier to see it where I have my hands on my head, but your lower hand here will be on your tailbone. So we were on the sacrum before, which is kind of the upper pelvis bone in the back, but the tailbone, the coccyx, is further down. So the tailbone is, kind of, yeah, closer to your butt. And so having one hand on your tailbone and then your other hand will be on your sphenoid bone. The sphenoid is actually a bone which is mostly behind the eyes. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to wrap my fingers kind of in front of my eyes. And so I'm going to try to touch the a little bit of my temple on both sides. And so if you are watching, you can see it, but
So I'm
you're just going
taking
to
off my
be.
glasses so I can touch both sides of my eyes.
Oh, good. Yeah, yeah. If you have glasses on, take those off. It makes it much easier. And so you're touching where your head, instead of the flat part of your face, where your head turns to go to the side, you're touching around those sides.
Mhm.
And take 2 or 3 deep breaths here and notice what happens inside. And I'm moving my hands already because I feel some alertness. I did get to 3 deep breaths, but that's about my limit today.
So what did that alertness feel like for you?
Yeah, just a little amping up. I feel more awareness around my chest, more
Mm.
awareness around where I was touching, so around my eyes, around my temples. It's very subtle for me, and I think for most people it'll be very subtle unless you do hold it for longer. But how about you, Lisa? Did you notice any effects?
I had kind of a mixed experience, and that may be because, we're doing this podcast, but I felt like around my eyes where I was touching, my head felt calmer and more focused, but I did feel that amping up of the energy in my core. And so, if you've done this exercise and you're listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts and you're like, I can't imagine what they're doing, go to YouTube because there is a video and you can see us.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you did get amped up a good amount by doing that last one, you can go back to the first one, holding occiput
Mhm.
and press pause, hold occiput and sacrum again for 3 to 5 deep breaths. Settle yourself back down, get calmer, and then come back. Feel free to do that if you want.
I'm kind of wondering if these might be good exercises for people to do right before they start writing. So, for instance, I often tell people to meditate, do some sort of meditation before you start because it primes the brain and it also calms the nervous system. But what do you think about adding something like this in addition to, or I guess as a replacement to meditation?
Well, I think it's a great idea. Also, if somebody does have anxiety and they have some of the symptoms that you described earlier, meditating is very difficult, right? If
Yes.
if I have big fear or unfortunately if I have some paranoia, that's
Hmm.
hard to be with, right? It's hard to sit
Yeah.
still. It's hard to be with those thoughts. It's extremely uncomfortable. And so if I meditate, that will only make some of those come up even more.
Hmm.
And so for some people, movement, whether it's going for a meditative walk or, hiking in nature, or even yoga or qigong, tai chi, swimming might be a better form of meditation.
Yes.
But certainly these somatic tools are possibly a substitute for meditation, or certainly a good supplement to it as well. And yeah, doing this before writing, I think could be come in really handy, whether you need a little bit of perking up or
Mhm.
settling down. So you might just want to choose to do one of them before you write, but I think it could be a good idea.
Yeah, and I'm really glad that you talked about the struggle that trauma survivors in particular have around meditation. I often caution people around that, and there are two meditations that I will invite people to do. But I often tell them, like, don't just go off and do a bunch of meditations, and certainly don't try to do meditation on your own. The two meditations that I do invite people to do are the Soles of the Feet meditation that I learned from Kristen Neff. I find that to be really helpful, really grounding for people. And that is similar to a walking meditation. The other meditation that I find to be really helpful is a heart coherence meditation.
Oh, great.
I have a guided version of that, which you can get on Insight Timer. And I will put the link in the show notes if anyone wants to listen to it. And it's a very short guided meditation that has a lot of somatic experiencing pieces to it.
That sounds great. Yeah, that sounds awesome. Also, I offer a number of short courses where there are these somatic tools. And even if you do a couple of these several times, it becomes a meditation. And
Yes.
yeah, really, really good. Sort of having someone guide you through it is also helpful too. It's kind of a helpful distraction. I can be in my body, but I'm not, a prisoner to my own difficult thoughts as well. So, yeah.
I saw this one training with Eckhart Tolle where the whole meditation was making a cup of tea.
Oh, yeah, I did a meditation where we had to sit, I think it was for 5 minutes, and enjoy a single raisin for 5 minutes.
I have done that as well.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
know, and you'd be surprised. You might think that you can't enjoy a raisin for 5 minutes, but you can.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Yeah, you can really stretch out those taste buds. Yeah.
Yes. And so that is another thing someone could do. If you are also trying to feel more alert, or, you can do some of these reciprocals and then get a raisin or get something spicy or crunchy and try to eat it as slowly as possible. And that can also be a way to wake up or calm down the brain, depending on what you need. So, we've talked about somatic experiencing in general. We've done some of it together. I work with writers who have
Mhm.
really tough stories. And some of them have therapists, and this was something I didn't know when I was working as a therapist, but I'm really clear about now, is that writing itself, especially if you're writing about tough experiences, is not simply the act of writing. You are reliving the experience because the brain doesn't tell time, right?
Right.
Remembering activates some of the same parts of the nervous system as actually going through the experience. So if someone is triggered in the middle of a writing session, or they leave a writing session and they just can't shake it off because they were dealing with some tough stuff and it's just still there and going, through them. What advice do you have for people who have that experience?
Yeah, great. I mean, it's so great to give people these resources. So first, I would recommend getting support, right?
Yes.
Who has my back? Who are my friends? Leaning into support if at all
Mhm.
possible. I understand it's really difficult if we have a history of complex trauma,
Yes.
right? When there is early trauma, it takes a lot of time to reestablish basic trust and
Yeah.
safety. And just that takes a lot of time. And so if we have someone in our life who can help to support our nervous system, whether they might be a yoga teacher, a therapist, a body worker, or someone spiritual, a pastor, etc., reach out to them, go to a
Yes.
yoga class. What helps you come back to yourself, right?
Mhm.
How do I come back to a healthier baseline? Also, understand that we all regress from time to time.
Yes.
Again, life happens, stress happens. We all take 2 steps forward and sometimes take 1 step back. And so that's natural. Don't beat
Yeah.
yourself up about that. And the key to healing early developmental trauma, that trauma is relational as well. And
Hmm.
so we have to do that healing in relationship with other people. In other words, we can't do this work on our own.
I just want to reiterate some of the things that you said that I think are really important is one, don't go it alone. And I think
Mhm.
there are two ways that people can do that. Number one, it is important if you are dealing with a tough story to have one person who is trained to bear witness to your experience and walk that journey alongside you. You deserve that. And in fact, denying yourself that can actually re traumatize yourself because you can reenact what happened to you when the bad thing was going on. So definitely have that support. Another thing that I often tell people is to do what I call the sandwich technique, which is contact someone, even if it's a writing group member. They don't need to know what you're writing about. Like they're not your therapist and you don't need to treat them like one. Tell somebody, hey, I'm going to do a tough writing session. I just want to let you know, tough writing session ends in 30 minutes. Can I just call you and tell you what I'm going to do for the rest of my day? That way, you have someone that is there walking through that with you. And the other thing you said that I think is really important is that, yes, if someone has trauma in their background, they may get activated or struggle with some of these things. But part of the problem is not just what happens in our nervous systems, it's the stories we tell ourselves when these things happen. So it's normal to regress. It's normal to have times when you go backwards and you don't have to tell yourself the story that you have failed, that you are broken, that these things will not heal.
Uh-huh. Yeah, that's so great. It's so good. Right. And yeah, we all have discomfort, right?
Yeah.
The key is over time, you do enough of this work, the discomfort does not mean distress,
Yes.
right? Discomfort only becomes distress when we have a story to hang it on.
I love
Um,
that.
yeah, and so can I over time, we do enough somatic process work, there's a little gap. I can take one breath before I have this instinctual reaction like, "Oh my
Mhm.
god, there's that pain again. I must be," fill in the blank with some catastrophic thinking. But over time, we can increase that gap and we can have more space between, yeah, the habitual patterns. And yeah, we can start to open up and start to realize, oh, it's just discomfort, right?
Mhm.
Yeah, fear happens, right? Life happens. Joy, happiness, contentment happens. But yeah, talking about the if somebody gets triggered while they're writing, working on some really difficult stuff, my course on liberating the space element is over 3 hours of material, and in it, we go through all of the reciprocal holds, like 35 different holds, in addition to 2 other techniques, and I unpack them, and there's more of a meditative time for doing it at the end, and so these tools help to create more space in the nervous system, in the fascia, in the body. And so these techniques have been especially beneficial for my clients with complex trauma, people who have really high levels of sensitivity, people who are very sensitive to energy
Mhm.
benefit a lot from doing the full set of reciprocals. And also once you learn them, you don't have to go through all 35 because that can take close to half an hour.
Yeah.
So if you find 3 or 4 of these tools that you love and really help you to feel more aligned, you can do those in just 4 or 5 minutes and come back to yourself, come back to feeling centered, feeling grounded. And so this course is $75 to purchase it, or you can also get access to it if you sign up for the coaching level membership on my site, and I hope many people benefit from taking it.
Yeah. And so all of that information will be in the show notes. And what I can say is that, when it comes to healing and writing, I think many people feel like they are going to reach some mountaintop sometime when none of the problems exist. Like I'm a writer and I never experience writer's block. I know how to publish anything that I want. It is all good. Same thing with healing. We have these experiences that there's an arrival point. There is no arrival point. What I found from my own experience, and I'll be curious to know if this is your experience as well, is that we just expand the container that we have inside ourselves for discomfort and ambiguity. We learn how to hold space for it so that it's not as difficult, right? And we don't have to build as many stories around it. We can just say, ah, there it is. and be
Right.
okay with it.
Right. Over time, there can be more acceptance, but a big piece is compassion for ourselves,
Yeah.
toward ourselves, and that will also help us to be more compassionate to others as a result. And kindness to self. Yeah, can I understand and acknowledge that given my history, of course I have some ups and downs. Of course I have
Mhm.
challenging days, challenging weeks. Can I lean into support? So over time, there'll be greater compassion for ourselves, understanding that I'm human. I make
Mhm.
mistakes. I am not perfect. And yeah, so there's gonna be easier days for writing and harder days.
Y
So understanding that if I have complex trauma, there will be this kind of cyclical pattern. So there will be ups and downs. And so having compassion for yourself, accepting and understanding, yeah, it'll make our relationship to ourself easier and therefore our outer relationships easier as well.
Absolutely. And the more tools that you have, and that's the thing, we all have to learn tools. We don't come equipped with them, but the more tools we have, the easier this becomes. Well, you know what? You and I could be here for days and days and days talking about it because it's a deep topic. And also, there's just so much to talk about, and we're having so much fun. But life must go on. And I have three final speed round questions I'm going to ask you as we
Okay.
wrap up. And the first question is, what is the best piece of writing advice that you've ever received? Because you do all of this work with your somatic experiencing and cranial sacral, and you also write blog posts.
Right. So I have been writing for a while, and but I think the best advice has come from my somatic experiencing teachers. Right? So again, to reiterate, can I be kinder to myself? Can I
Yes.
slow down a little bit? Take a deep breath, accept who and what and where I am.
Hmm.
So honoring these natural cycles, yeah, can I accept these facets of myself? Can I permit myself to be with a difficult emotion without assuming there's something wrong? Can I lean into support and share with somebody and say,
Yeah.
"This is really hard." And for a lot of people, that can be a huge step. That can be a really big step. And also understanding that when there's complex trauma, there's oftentimes shame because I don't have the same capacities or abilities as someone who seems quote unquote normal. I don't like to use that word, but maybe my expectations aren't realistic.
Hmm.
Trauma is difficult, but the nervous system can change. It can transform. So, baby steps, right? Can I start being a little bit kinder to myself this afternoon,
Mm.
tonight, when there's greater compassion, greater acceptance of what is, without as much guilt or shame, then things get easier, including the
Hmm.
writing process. Yeah.
Absolutely. So you work with people all the time, trying to help them care for themselves better. What is one thing you do to nurture your resilience?
Yeah. Okay. So I do have a couple of thoughts here. So briefly, first, I love connecting with people. So especially if it's in a therapeutic, caring, or spiritually
Mhm.
oriented kind of way. So doing qigong together, meditating together,
Mhm.
going for a walk or a hike together in nature, being curious together really helps me to nurture my
Mhm.
resilience. And second, and I think this is really big for people if they have a history of trauma, the second way I nurture my resilience is to practice moderation.
Mm.
If we do a lot of healing work all at once, or if I push really hard one week when that is not the norm, then the inner pendulum starts to swing, right? It takes a big
Mhm.
swing toward if I do a lot of healing work all at once, the inner pendulum takes a big swing toward the healing vortex.
Mhm.
However, that big swing, is typically followed by a counter swing back toward the trauma vortex, and there can be,
Mm.
10 minutes or an hour, a couple hours of difficulty, and so we wanna go slow. We wanna titrate this work, do a little bit at a time, and then give it time to integrate. When we're stretched thin, it's possible for anybody to regress. So practicing everything in moderation helps us to stay in alignment.
Absolutely. And, so think about if you practice yoga, there is always a shavasana or a corpse pose at the very end. There's rest. And, if you are working really hard to heal and you're experiencing a lot of exhaustion or a lot of emotional volatility, give yourself a break. You do not have to heal all at once. In fact, no one does.
Right,
So just go
right.
slow.
Yeah, and if you try to push through too hard, it won't stick. And so, yeah, the baby steps, the integration time, the titration, so big, so important there.
If people want to connect with you, they want to learn more about reciprocals and your work, what is the best way for them to connect with you?
Yeah, thank you so much for this, Lisa. The best way to get in touch with me is either of my websites. So I used traumainformedastrology.com. That's more for coaching for my mentees. It's for distance sessions and for practitioners who want to learn with me. And then I use mkirbymore.com. That's more for somatic process clients and in-person body work. So either of those websites you can find out how to get in touch with me. But also, Lisa, please feel free to share my email in the show notes. This coming fall, I will be offering occasional free discussion groups that are public. And I do monthly Instagram live sessions where we discuss various topics. So I would really be happy for people to reach out and get in touch with me.
Yeah. And so all of that will be in the show notes and you can check him out. He already has some Instagram lives. You can go back and check out and then you can listen. And do you have a newsletter that people can sign up for so that they can know when these talks are going to happen?
I do have a newsletter. Yeah, you can sign up for that at traumainformedastrology.com.
So,
So,
once again, that will also be in the show notes. Well, thank you so much, Kirby, for being on the podcast today. I am deeply honored that you are here. And thank you so much for these wonderful exercises that will take me through the rest of the day and beyond.
yeah, thank you so much. I really appreciate this. I am so deeply appreciative for all that you do and for who you are. So, thank you for bringing these resources and tools to so many people.
That's it for today's episode. If you'd like to learn more about Kirby or you're interested in his course on reciprocals, please see the show notes for this episode. In it, you'll find a discount code he created just for our listeners. If you're learning from or enjoying this podcast, please subscribe to my YouTube channel. It's a free and easy way to support the podcast. You can also get the latest episodes delivered to your inbox by signing up for my Writing Your Resilience newsletter. As a thank you, you'll receive a free copy of a trauma survivor's guide to writing the tough stuff. You can also follow the podcast on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, where you can leave a 5-star review. If you have questions for me, comments about the podcast, or questions or topics you'd like me to consider for the Writing Your Resilience podcast, please leave a comment on YouTube. I read them all, and I'd love to hear from you.